Hey everybody, Rob Maurer here. Happy Friday. Today we have a relatively light Tesla news day, so we're going to be taking a closer look at the relationship between dealers and automakers. Automotive News with a really good article on this subject today and something that's flaring up a little bit in that relationship. And then we do have a couple other Tesla news items as well. Start off with the stock. Tesla today down 2.6%, closing at $196.88. The NASDAQ down 1.7% on the day today, so rougher market. I think that's probably the result of the PCE index, which was reported this morning. Came in a lot hotter than expected, 0.6% increase for core PCE month over month. That was up versus 0.4% expected. So it's a pretty high month over month increase. And we can see, even though the chart isn't updated here for this most recent result, for some reason on investing.com, we can see that 0.6% would be tied with the August release or rather I think that's the July release last year for the second highest month over month increase in the last couple of years. So not what we want to see, especially with the PPI and CPI coming in hotter than expected as well. Disappointing in terms of expectations for inflation, expectations for increased interest rates. And of course, we've talked a lot about core numbers excluding housing for services in particular. That was where Powell was highlighting wanting to see signs of disinflation since we have seen it in other places. We can see here that this number has not declined, unfortunately. So you can see core services, if I zoom in on this, core services X housing, this is the year over year increase. So we can see that that actually ticked up a little bit year over year, but probably more importantly, the 3-month annualized rate, which just looks at the month over month increase for the last 3 months and then annualizes that rate. That's also ticked up here in this last report. So it's unfortunate that in that area, as well as obviously the more headline type of numbers, we have seen this unfortunately not show continued signs of decline, like I think people were kind of hoping for and maybe somewhat expecting. So unfortunate, it looks like, interest rate increases, 50 basis points probably very much back on the table for March, but we'll see as we head into that meeting. All right, looking at the calendar. So of course for next week, we will have a few macro items, but all eyes on Investor Day next week on Wednesday, March 1st. I'm going to head down to Austin, so I'll be at the event, and afterwards, the Austin Owners Club is holding a panel at the Clive Bar, so I'm going to participate in that too. If you have interest in going to that, it's completely free. I think they just want you to sign up for tickets just so they have a good idea of head count. So if you want to head there, that's always fun. Usually the gathering spot for these type of events, and I'll be there on Wednesday evening. So TBD on the schedule for next week as we kind of work through the Investor Day week. All right, getting into this update from Automotive News today, really interesting article published here talking about the impact of warranty costs and labor costs on automakers and dealerships and how they navigate between those. Basically, when a customer brings a vehicle into a dealer for service, they fall into two categories. They either fall into covered by warranty work or they are paying out of pocket because they're no longer in warranty. So the difference here for dealerships is pretty significant. Obviously, if the customer is paying, they receive money from the customer. If they're covered by warranty, they're being paid by the automaker. So it's an interesting relationship to navigate, and it's actually been a point of tension for a long time between the two parties because warranty work is such a high percentage of service work in general for dealerships. Scroll down here a little bit and we can see that percentage. It accounts for about 40% warranty work and internal work from the dealerships. It accounts for about 40% of the dealer's labor sales. So obviously automakers are probably the biggest customer for dealers in terms of that service work. So as a large customer, oftentimes there's volume discounts associated with that. And that is the case with dealerships as they work with automakers. So if customer comes in, they're covered by warranty, the service is provided under warranty, then that is billed at a lower rate than if the customer comes in and is out of warranty and is paying out of pocket. The technicians then are charging a higher rate, and obviously the dealers then are having to navigate the different rate structure based on the different type of work, which causes some conflicts between how work gets assigned and things like that, and generally creates just a little bit of tension for these dealers. So what's happening here is dealers are pushing back on this. They want basically just a flat rate across the board, whether it's warranty work or customer work. And they've actually been successful in pushing back on this with some regulation. So in Illinois, Wisconsin, and Montana, there's already been legislation put in place that requires automakers to pay the same rate that customers would be paying for that service work, even if it is covered by warranty. So because they were previously getting a discount, that means that the cost for automakers, which they reserve as a part of vehicle sales, warranty reserves, that is increasing because of this pushback, because of this regulation that dealerships are fighting for and actually being successful in gaining in some of these states. So just in Illinois, the estimate from the Automotive Alliance sort of lobbyist coalition, which we'll talk about more in a second, that is estimated to be an additional $250 million of payments that are coming from automakers to dealers to cover this cost increase for the levelization of that pay. So that's a huge number already, and that's just for a single year. If we look at, just talking about Illinois here, a chart that we've referenced here for Tesla insurance numbers many times, this is the vehicle registration by state. Illinois is 3.5%. And there's talk here about similar legislation being in process in Colorado, California, Texas. If we look at just California and Texas, that's another 21% of the market. So that's 6 times Illinois. If you look at a similar monetary impact scaled up 6 times, you're talking more than $1 billion a year for additional costs on automakers. So it gets pretty significant. And again, that's just California and Texas right there. So if you take something like this nationwide, that can start to add up pretty quickly, especially as the years go on. And we're talking about relatively small margin businesses here for automakers. So anytime there's this, increase in warranty reserves that they would have to then either pass on to customers, increasing costs, or absorb within their margins, that obviously can take a decent chunk of that. So this is the kind of stuff that with Tesla, having a vertically integrated model, you just don't have to worry about those conflicts about, okay, customers bringing a car in, is that customer paying out of pocket? Do we charge a higher rate? Is it warranty work? Do we charge a lower rate? Do we have to go and lobby for different or equalized levels there? Tesla just doesn't have to worry about any of that stuff with the vertically integrated model. So this has kind of been a thorn in the automakers' sides. As I mentioned, that lobbying coalition that the automakers have, it's called the Alliance for Automotive Innovation. We can see that lobby group. It's BMW, Ford, GM, Toyota's in here, Volkswagen's in here. So this is most of the automotive market. Mercedes-Benz there, Kia. Most of the automotive market, obviously a notable exception being Tesla. But this is a huge lobby group for the automotive industry, and they're pushing back on this. They say the dealers have come here and asked you to write them a blank check in terms of the dealers making these requests of regulators. So here's some states where some of that action is being undertaken. Here's a comment from General Motors. They say that the whole premise of the manufacturer-dealer relationship is the foundation of the dealer franchise agreement contract that they have. And every year that these state laws pass, we lose another piece of our contract and they gain more rights. So again, with Tesla, you have the dealership sort of entity within the same company as Tesla. So you don't have to worry about, are the dealerships gaining? Are the automakers gaining? How is the relationship structured and who is in a more fair position? Just all the same thing, and you don't have to worry about it. So it's very interesting to see this dichotomy and seeing the dealers make some progress on this. So we talked about that, the 40%. Here's another comment from GM. They say just sort of about the general structure here about service from dealers for automakers. Says the deal was we promised that the dealer would get all of the warranty work so they have a captured audience, and in exchange for all that work that they can go nowhere else for, they agreed to do the work at discounted rates, much as they would with any fleet customer. So basically that's the original premise of this. That's why rates are lower, but now dealers are pushing back on that and trying to avoid any of those discounts, which again adds cost for automakers, lowers margins, or those get passed on. So we talked about the cherry picking aspect here. And then one other thing in this article that I found pretty interesting, we talked about that alliance coalition or the lobbying coalition. Volkswagen has actually pushed back on this directly and individually. They filed a lawsuit in federal court in December trying to get what's called the Multiplier Act here, which we're not going to cover specifically, but is along these lines of trying to increase the rates for warranty work for technicians. They filed a claim against that in federal court, and other automakers did not join, despite the alliance having a similar perspective on this from the comments that we previously discussed. Automotive News article here says, however, a person briefed on internal deliberations on the issue among Alliance members told Automotive News that the group had judged the chances of success on getting the law overturned on constitutional grounds as low, but the person who shared the information only on condition of anonymity said Alliance members were concerned about the quote-unquote potential discovery burden into automaker warranty practices that would be overly quote-unquote intrusive. So it's interesting to see them not pursue this, as it sounds like, based on how this is being presented, obviously just one source and an anonymous source, but how it's being presented here, it kind of sounds like they're just hesitant to raise anything from a legal perspective because they're a little bit worried about what that might also entail or uncover around these practices. So, this has been a business that's had a lot of regulation, had a lot of reasons to be regulated because of dynamics like this, where service can be a little bit predatory at times. So that's part of the original intent of the dealership network, but it's always been a little bit questionable about some of these practices. So that to me kind of highlights some of those things, which I thought was interesting as well. So overall, very interesting. I think we'll have to keep a close eye on this as some of this other legislation unfolds. Again, a lot of progress in Illinois in terms of the dealerships winning those things, and then some other states currently have legislation sort of in the pending process or under review. So interesting to see, and again, highlights the differences of where legacy automakers are positioned, the challenges that they have to deal with and potentially impact them out of their control versus how Tesla is positioned, which is obviously a big win for Tesla. All right, moving on, we've got an update here on Tesla in Mexico. The president of Mexico has commented a little bit more, as we have gotten quite a few times now, on a possible Tesla location, this time for Nuevo León, saying that in this location, it sounds like there are some water issues, and in general, government in Mexico is trying to, I don't know if dissuade is the right word, but persuade people to invest in more of the southern region of Mexico, where it sounds like they're not having as much issues with water scarcity. Of course, this is something that Tesla has dealt with Giga Berlin. We've talked a lot about that. But he was saying that in terms of permitting, if there's no water, no, they wouldn't get a permit. Simply put, we don't give out permits for that. It's not feasible. So it sounds like there's Nuevo León, and then there is, I can't remember the other name of the other area, but near Mexico City were kind of the two areas that we've heard that Tesla is maybe looking at possible locations. And it sounds like there's some push here from Mexico's government to try to incentivize Tesla to invest a little bit further south. So we'll see on that. Again, interesting, and maybe we'll hear more about Tesla's Mexico plans at Investor Day next week. And then the last couple of things here, we do have an update on pricing in Denmark. Tesla has lowered prices by the equivalent of around $4,300 US on the base Model 3. They've also dropped the Model 3 long range a little bit, so about 8% or 7% drop on those respectively in Denmark. And then it looks like from Tesla Motors Club here from Willow Hiller, interesting post shared that may be eventually relevant in the United States, but sounds like in, I believe this was South Korea, some photos here of a little kiosk that Tesla has set up at the supercharging stations, presumably to handle payment, I would guess, for non-Tesla EVs. We've talked about how some of the legislation efforts for the United States in terms of the EV charging funding has been around having something like this, where customers don't necessarily have to have an app and some other information can be displayed, like the exact number of kilowatt hours being used or what have you. So kind of interesting to see Tesla's implementation of this. Unfortunately, we kind of just have these two pictures and not a lot of other information, but maybe someone in that area can do a little bit of recon on that and find out a little bit more about that, but kind of interesting to see. And then Tesla has also filed a patent for their stainless steel that they plan to use presumably on the Cybertruck. I don't think the patent calls that out specifically. Looking through this from Electric's article and just taking a quick look at the patent, I don't think there's a lot of value that I can add here other than just pointing out that it's been filed. But for anyone that is a little bit more inclined in those areas, definitely feel free to check that out. And then lastly, an update on Ford. They have continued or extended the production shutdown of the F-150 Lightning for another week, following that battery fire that had happened in the, I believe, in the delivery staging lot. So we'll keep an eye on that as Ford works to resolve those issues. All right, that is it for today and for the week. As always, thank you for listening. Make sure you're subscribed and signed up for notifications. You can also find me on Twitter at Tesla Podcast. And we'll see you on Monday for the February 27th episode of Tesla Daily. Thank you.